All right, I think we are good to start. So, hello everyone. Again, welcome to April's last Thursdays. We are delighted to have you with us today. My name is Mutile Mwongo. I work in the Insights Hub at Development Dynamics around research, knowledge, and systems practice. And one of the things we do in the Insights Hub is we hold ecosystem convenings and sector convenings, which are basically dialogues where we bring together some of the leading minds, enthusiasts, and practitioners to discuss issues of interest within the social impact and development space. And so we hold this every last Thursday of the month, which is where the name Last Thursdays come from. And so this is an opportunity for people to get together and exchange knowledge, share ideas, share challenges they're facing, and best practices. Because we know that this is a space that is constantly changing and evolving. And over the last year, we've explored topics like intersectional feminism, movement building, social impact financing, and several others, which you can find on our YouTube channel in a playlist under the title Last Thursdays. And the reason we hold these convenings is because we understand that we are living and working in a pretty complex environment currently, one that is unpredictable and volatile. And while this has been true throughout the years, we have really seen it manifest over the last 5 years or so. We're dealing with things like ecological and environmental crises, poverty, increasing rates of conflict and instability in different countries. And we know that it's impossible for any entity, any single entity, any individual to figure out matters of such intricacy on their own. And so we find great value in collaboration and in collective intelligence as we navigate some of these challenges. And so at Development Dynamics, we've figured out an approach that seems to work, our triple play approach, which is threefold. We use human-centered design or design thinking, where we try to understand very deeply the people and keep them at the center of any innovations, any solutions that we bring to the table. We think about systems practice as vital because it helps us to understand interconnectedness, interrelatedness of all these different social and environmental issues, and even political issues that we try to navigate. And so the question we ask here is, how might we in this mess? And we also use strategic foresight, which is a way of thinking about the future as a multiplicity, and just being cognizant of the fact that the future is not linear and it's not a simple reflection of the past. So we try to ask ourselves and imagine the range and the spectrum of possible futures that may be presented to us and that we may participate in, so that we can think about adaptable strategies to these challenges that we are trying to navigate. And so just to give a brief recap of the previous episodes and lay the context for today, some of the most recent conversations we've had are around systems practice, where we had a series of 3 episodes. In the first one, we talked about some of the key concepts in systems thinking and practice, where we explored mindsets and mental models. In the second episode, we talked about tools and frameworks, where we discussed the iceberg model, which helps us to really dig deep into developing an understanding of the issues that we are dealing with, peeling back the layers, understanding the beliefs and narratives that drive and perpetuate problems, the complex problems we are dealing with. And most recently, in February, we talked about leverage points, which is one of the key ways that systems practice helps us to address challenges. And the topic here was funding disruptions, where we tried to unpack the impacts of the funding disruptions that have recently taken place and the leverage points that we can identify as we navigate this space. And so just trying to continue weaving that thread throughout our conversations. We are talking about the ecosystem in impact measurement and management. And so some of the questions we are thinking about very deeply are how do we measure impact in an ecosystem that is volatile and that is constantly changing? People have had their programs affected by funding disruptions. So what does that mean when we need to measure impact? And secondly, how do we manage what can be quite stringent accountability requirements on the part of investors when investees have different needs and capabilities? How do we keep the people who are doing the work at the center? But most importantly, how do we keep communities at the center of all this work and at the center of the navigations of these changes? The question here is how do we keep impact at the helm of everything we do? And so with that, I'd like to hand over to Kelvin, who will further contextualize and lead us into the discussion today around the broader context or the ecosystem of impact measurements. Over to you, Kelvin.
Thank you, Mutile. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here, and my name is Kabutu Kelvin, and I work with Development Dynamics as the Manager Finance and Investments. As we transition into the next session, let's ground ourselves in the power of collective impact. As investors, investees, and intermediaries, we all hold a piece of the puzzle, and we can all collectively align the pieces with clarity and collaboration as we aim to create collective impact. So our work as the investors, investees, and intermediaries is not isolated at all, and it's connected. So in this, I welcome you to this session to see how interconnected is everything related to impact and how we can all come together to make a collective impact. So together we can catalyze systemic change by being intentional and coordinated in how we track, measure, and report our impact. So I welcome you all to this session where we'll be delving deeper into a framework that we will be using to measure our impact today, which is the Ventures at the Helm, which was co-created by Laura Bodina, Heather Hachigian, and Karim Haji, and Penny Hawkins. And one of the things that I found interesting is the authors had a common goal of measurement and managing impact in their work. The Ventures at the Helm, which will be taking on today and breaking it down today and in the next last Thursday, has been adopted from the Ventures at the Helm, and which we will be using to align the conversation today. And I invite us all to take ownership, not just as practitioners or leaders, but as stewards of transformation in our communities and ecosystem. So join me as I take you through the journey of framing our direction, setting our compass, and steering with purpose. We can go to the next slide. The IMM journey is dynamic, often very nonlinear, and it has 4 main stages, and these stages are orienting, navigating, sailing, and tacking, as you can see on the screen, which represent not just the typical steps, but an adaptive mindsets. From the orienting phase, which is the first one, this is where we get to define what success looks like. In the navigating phase, this is where we get to test, listen, and learn from what is happening in the ecosystem, from what is happening in the work that we do. In the sailing phase, this is where we get to optimize what is working And lastly, to the tacking phase, is where we get to pivot in response to the change that we have made in the previous phases. So think at this as a voyage. Each phase calls for a different posture, different tools, and different kinds of listening, especially to our stakeholders. Think of these as a ship on the sea of impact, which you'll need to switch strategies depending on the winds, because again, on the sea using the same strategy, it's hard to navigate because there are winds that are pushing us in different directions. There are winds that there are waves that redirecting us, and the phases of the IMM journey, the ones that will be guiding us in the conversations. These today and the next last Thursday. So we will divide this into two sessions. Today we'll be handling the orienting and navigating phases. And on May 29th, when you registered for this session, you registered for two sessions. There is one on the 24th and the next one on the 29th of May, which is going to be our next last Thursday. So we'll be connecting sailing and tacking to these two and sharing how we can navigate through the whole impact measurement and management journey. So welcome you all to break down the first two phases and get to see um, what is happening in what phase, and how can we all measure our impact in all the phases to ensure that we are sailing well and we are moving swiftly. So on the first phase, which is the orienting, setting the impact goals. In this first phase, we begin with orienting, which can simply be defined as framing our mission. It's about defining our why, mapping our assumptions, and choosing metrics that matter. Some of the questions that we need to ask ourselves here are, who are we trying to impact? What changes do we want to see? And what are the key outcomes that will tell us we're on track? Basically, in this case, reminds me of a quote of, if we can't manage what we can't measure, we can't manage what we can't measure. So let's set the impact goals in this case, and maybe some of us are just starting, or maybe our old frameworks no longer reflect our current reality. And either way, this is where we get to set our impact compass, because then if we don't get to set it, then we don't know what we'll be measuring in the next sessions and in the next phases of the IMM journey. So some of the tools that we can use in this phase are the theory of change, which will help us in laying our logic and assumptions, results framework and logic models, which will help us in showing how different activities link to the outcomes mapping, which helps forecast long-term change, and lastly, the UN SDGs, which offer global language for impact alignment. So that is the first phase, and we all can see how we can all connect and tap into it. Into the second phase, which is the navigating phase, which is testing the hypothesis. Once you set the direction, navigating is about learning through action, testing the terrain, feedback, and discovery. And you've made some educated guesses. Now it's time to see what holds. Are you having the intended impact? Are there any surprises, positive or otherwise? At this stage, we are engaging directly with our stakeholders, testing what you think you know and refining based on what emerges. It asks us to get close to our users, hear their stories, see your work through their eyes, because again, once we are leaders, it's unless someone gets to share the feedback with us, at times we get to see the direction we are going to and the direction that we are taking through the people and through their eyes. So this phase is more about learning, adjusting, and listening deeply to internalize and not to respond, because at times we get to listen, to respond, but at times it's advisable to listen, to internalize, and to observe what is happening in this space. And again, yet as a voyage, get to learn more about the waves and how to navigate them. So this stage is rich with uncertainty, but also opportunity into high touch, immersive, and is very qualitative. So some of the tools we get to see in this phase. Here we get to learn to lean into tools that prioritize listening and more qualitative, such as focus group and interviews to help us gather detailed feedback, outcome harvesting to document and unexpected outcomes, and human-centered design to embed empathy into our learning. So this is where we ask the brave question: what is happening, what surprises us? Are we seeing unintended effect, both positive and negative? Remember, impact measurement and management, which is IMM, is not just about confirming what you believe, it's about discovering what you didn't know, or rather what you didn't get to ask. So with that, and with this introduction about IMM and the first two phases that um, we'll be tackling in this conversation. Now let's switch gears and get to hear from those at the helm, the real world navigators, our incredible panelists who are walking these journeys in real time. Each one of them brings a unique lens of IMM, from the challenges of orienting goals in the fast-moving context to navigating tough stakeholder landscapes. So allow me to introduce the panelists, starting with Meru Bashist. Meru is joining us from Nairobi. Meru is a design lead for the sexual, reproductive, maternal, and newborn health, global research, and innovation practice at the IRC. She works with our client researchers and country program teams to co-design solutions that reduce barriers and overcome fears of women and girls seeking SRMNH services in humanitarian settings. As human-centered design practitioner, Meru has experience leading research and design projects that understand and address the needs of variety of client segments, and married youth, rural and tribal communities, trans and queer folks, persons with disabilities, and sex workers, and people who inject drugs. So I would invite Meru to say hi to the participants. Meru?
Hello, everyone. Lovely to be here.
Thank you, Meru. Secondly, I would love to invite the second panelist, who is Abiola Bolarinwa. Abiola, maybe you can say hi to the participants as we proceed.
Yeah, hello, good afternoon. Good afternoon from Nigeria. I believe everyone can hear me clearly.
Yes, we can hear you.
Very good. Very good. Good afternoon. It's good to have a good session. We're looking forward to have a good session with everyone today. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Abiola. As he has shared, he's joining us from Nigeria. Abiola is an accomplished ESG and impact specialist with over 7 years of experience in sustainability consulting and impact management. He possesses a strong command of ESG advisory services, leveraging his expertise in ESG frameworks and standards such as GRI, SASB, TCFD, and SDGs to drive sustainable and responsible business practices. Abiola has extensive experience conducting ESG assessment and audits, ensuring compliance with the World Bank IFC performance standards and other global sustainability benchmarks. His data-driven approach enables him to analyze complex ESG risk and opportunities, providing strategic solutions that enhance corporate sustainability. He is also highly skilled in developing environmental and social management systems, ESMs, and occupational health and safety management to support organizations in managing sustainability risks effectively. Thirdly, I would love to invite Chris Chirambo. Chris, you can say hi to the participants.
Hi, everyone. Greetings from Malawi. I'm Chris Chirambo. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. So Chris is joining us from Malawi, as he has shared, and he is a dynamic thought leader with proven expertise in nonprofit and private sector organization leadership and management. He is a reliable, result-oriented, and a team player with excellent analytical presentation, negotiation, and problem-solving skills. He is a self-starter in the areas of business, strategy development, strategy functional reviews, financial management, grant management, admin and operations, partnership management, and project management. He has a strong interest in international development, public policy, humanitarian, and development programs. And lastly, I would love to invite Awor Ayecho. Awor, you can say hi to the participants.
Hello, everyone. It's good to be here.
Thank you. Awor is joining us from Nairobi, Kenya, and is a fundraising and organizational development consultant with over a decade of experience in nonprofit sector. She specializes in building sustainable fundraising systems using INPLADO process, which focuses on non-institutional strengthening and creating compelling proposals. Awor has worked on impactful campaigns such as advocating for housing rights and supporting youth agency through human rights education. She has also contributed to the US federal fundraising, grant research, and nonprofit governance, and currently serves as a board member for ISEC Kenya. Her expertise spans fundraising, program design, project leadership, and strategic planning. Help me welcome all the panelists. And for the panelists, thank you for being here and helping us break down this conversation of impact measurement and how we can all make a collective systemic change as we look forward to measuring our impact and measuring, managing, and reporting our impact. So we will, with the panelists, explore how they've navigated uncertainty, created clarity, and made impact measurement and meaningful, impact measurable and meaningful in the ecosystem. Join me as they take us through their impact journey. Starting with you, Abiola. To start with, Abiola, you had experience across ESG advisory and global sustainability standards. How have you seen the practice of impact measurement evolve over the years, particularly in how it's responding to today's complex global challenges? Abiola?
Hello. Please, Kelvin, please, can you please take the question again? So sorry.
Thank you, Abiola. I was sharing that you've had experience across ESG advisory and global sustainability standards. How have you seen the practice of impact measurement evolve over the years, particularly in how it's responding to today's complex global challenges?
Very good question, Kelvin. I will start like this. Some years ago, the world largely depends on a few frameworks to guide in reporting their impacts. And defining impact here is not limited to just financial impact. Also, it carries on, it includes environmental components, relevant parameters of the environment, and also the social issues. Yeah, a good example is the issue of community relations management, or let's say the issue of project impact towards indigenous people, just to give an example. So there have been changes around frameworks and guidelines that support organizations in terms to help them to document their professional activities, and then being able to use that to define their impact on two major components, which is the environment, also the social part of it. Interestingly, the world largely depends on GRI to report. However, as we progress in sustainability landscape, what we've seen is that there are several different countries all over the world are coming up with their own respective reporting guidelines. And the reporting guidelines tends to have their own unique methodology of reporting impact of organization operations. So what we've seen over time is that we've seen countries coming up with their own framework. At the same time, organization needs to now depend on the country where they are operating to then use the framework to report their own impact. So that's one of the major things that has changed over the years.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Biola, and for giving that the change that has changed over time. To Meru, you've led design initiative that center the lived realities of some of the most underserved and marginalized populations. So from your perspective, how can we adapt existing impact measurement and management IMM tools to better reflect the complexity of ecosystems and the interconnected barriers people face in humanitarian and SRHR contexts?
Sure, thanks, Calvin. I think current impact measurement processes measure what's most measurable and over lived experiences. So we tend to go towards what's simpler to measure than what's more complex to measure. In the field of healthcare, that could mean clinical outcomes, treatment uptake, even like patient satisfaction scores. But these indicators don't often tell the entire story, and the ones that do don't show up in conventional metrics. So I won't comment on what's the best tools, but what I would say is that we need to measure impact in 3 dimensions. And those 3 dimensions are focus, depth, and breadth. And we tend to measure only in depth, only in breadth. What I mean by focus is whose needs are we meeting and whose needs are we missing? And so as a human-centered designer, I tend to focus on what we in HCD called extreme users over mainstream users. So by extreme users, I mean people who are at the fringe of our ecosystem. They are not your typical clients. They're the ones who are pushed to the limits of the system. They're the ones who find it most challenging, whether it's that vulnerable girl heading a household, or the other one who has to hide from her parents to access some service, somebody with a disability, or a very, very young mother. So those are the people who we need to focus on, only because when we kind of try to understand whether our intervention or service is working for them, we have designed something, or we've understood where the real gaps lie. So it's these extreme users who expose the gaps that we'll miss if we only talk to just the mainstream user. So that's focus. By depth, what I mean is that to what extent are we meeting the needs of our clients? So in the world of sexual reproductive health, what that could mean is by simply getting a contraceptive doesn't mean that we're meeting clients' need if they're not able to use that contraceptive or negotiate use of that contraceptive without fear. And so if that is still missing, then we still have a long way to go. A way I explain this to the teams I work with here at the International Rescue Committee is through my latest experience of being hospitalized with malaria, wherein this very competent team of nurses and doctors obviously got the malaria out of my body, which is meeting the health outcome. But what was my experience as a patient like? And that was not actually captured in, even when they did like a patient satisfaction score. And these very intangible measurement indicators have very tangible effects on outcomes. So now, whether I access healthcare timely depends on what my experience in healthcare was. Whether I go, what service provider I go to depends on how user friendly or those service providers were. So that is the depth of impact which we often don't measure. And the last bit is breadth, and I think this is what we are most familiar with, which is just how far does the impact travel. So I would just extend it to looking at what are the ripple effects of something, of a service that we provide to a community. So girls in South Sudan, if they're sharing their additional doses of Cyana Press, which is a certain self-injectable, that is extending the breadth of our service. When our clients use our referral cards to talk to their partners, male partners, about contraception, so if it's used for couple communication, the impact multiplies organically. So our interventions need to be able to do that, and we need to be able to measure whether they're doing that or not and adapt accordingly. I'll pause there and give it back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Meru, for sharing that and introducing focus and depth in impact measurement, because at times we get to focus more on the breadth and missing more on the focus and depth. Thank you for that. And for Chris, you've led complex development initiatives, particularly those engaging women and youth groups, often at the heart of transformative change. From your experience, how have ripple effects or unexpected impacts shown up in these systems? What lessons have you drawn from managing and responding to them, please?
Thank you so much, Kevin. When you are leading high impact and dynamic initiatives where you have a lot of people, and then there is also a huge set of expectation, it becomes very difficult, especially with the volatility of the elements of either nature or man-made, which may come in, and then you find yourself at a point where you're at some sort of a crossroads, and you're not able to actually get the result that you actually wanted. So one of the things that we have done in the past was, one is also to promote agility in managing initiatives. So we have to be very proactive in responding to the natural tenets, or even the human influenced tenets, so that at the end of the day we should get the desired impact that we were looking for. So that agility also brings in like a little bit of a tickle in the head, so that we can be a little more creative and innovative. I would give you an example. In the middle of COVID-19, I was learning a youth focused leadership program, and we were meeting regularly in person. And then the COVID came, and then everybody else was sent home. They were the preventative equipment were not readily available, and then we had to decide which way works better for us. Probably Zoom could have worked, but then we didn't have enough money to pay for Zoom. So we looked for affordable alternatives that could help us to still being able to engage, but at the same time transferring knowledge from one person to the other in the middle of a crisis as the COVID-19 was. So those are some of the things that we have to look at. We have to look at innovation at the center of impact management. We have to look at quick and strategic response to issues that may come in the middle of our implementation of the project, or anything that we are working on. And the other thing is that also at the end, we need to look at how do we equate figures to numbers. In that sense, we are looking at how much have we invested in this initiative, and then how much or what have we achieved. Those things must tally, and then if we are working on tallying them, I would still go back to agility as one of the key things that should come in the middle of all this. So impact measurement, it's not a one-off or one direction kind of a process. It is to some extent cyclical. So it moves in cycles. And at every point, you've got to review what you are actually benefiting or getting. Because if you let it to run flow to the end, you may find that you have invested so much, but you are not even reaping anything. You are actually at the end of a zero. So at every point that you are doing your initiatives, whether you are doing malaria programs or even humanitarian aid, even when you're taking one bag of maize distributing to the community, at every point you have to be well aware of what is actually happening. It could be transportation that is a hindrance. And then at the end of the day, you will not deliver in time, or maybe you may deliver very quickly, but now you have to also look at, okay, if I delivered very quickly, what is it that made me deliver very quickly? So the process of impact measurement, if we look at the ecosystem in its holistic, it is designed in that way so that it gives us thinking to follow it through every step that we are actually making. I will have to stop here, Kevin, and then thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for that and for connecting that. In every stage that we are, we all should take a pause and reflect. What impact have we made? How fast have we made the impact to, again, help us see and analyze internally what have we done well and what do we need to do to improve on that in the future. And I hear you mentioned about finances and tracking them and seeing the figures. And now to award, as you've supported in organizations in strengthening their financial model, from grassroots advocacy to international grant making. So based on your experience, Award, what financial models or frameworks do you believe are best suited to support robust and effective impact measurement and management? IMM, Award.
Thank you, Calvin, for that question. And the biggest and the most important tool for financing is the budget. That is it. It is as simple as that. But the question is, how do we distribute the resources in a manner that allows that iterative nature of IMM, right? So we know that in a traditional mail structure, it's for monitoring and evaluation is designed for reporting upwards, right? It's for accountability to your financiers, whoever they may be. And everything that we speak on in relation to the data that we collect, to the outcomes that we see for all our programs, for all our projects, even whatever it is that we share from a partnership perspective, from virtually on our website, everything has been tailored to attract the attention of funding. Now, this severely limits what it is we can do with the data that we collect, right? So when building a budget, operationally speaking, that is the tool you use. It's just, how do we use it? Now, typically, a lot of times, how impact measurement is budgeted for is it is budgeted either in contingency, as part of the 15% contingency, and also budgeted in terms of salaries. And that's how we've always viewed budgeting for IMM, but it's more than that. So to be able to have a robust and iterative IMM system, ideally, your budget should cover 5 to 10%. Whatever that is should be IMM allocated. So this cannot be solely in contingency, because it means that whatever it is we put in our contingency, at 15%, 10% of that already goes to IMM, but it's never enough. And you have to think of IMM in this internally and externally, right? So internally speaking, who are the people who gather this data? Who are the people who assess it, analyze it? And who are the people that build the stories that we now share as it relates to the work that we do? That's the first thing. Who is the internal IMM point person? The second thing is, who is the IMM point person for our partnerships? Because that's also an area of resourcing. It's a shared risk, it's a shared responsibility. Then how does that reflect in our partnerships? So who is the internal point person for the partnerships that we attract, for the projects that we do? The third one is, who is the IMM point person from the perspective of the client or the beneficiary? And that is extremely important for us because that is what we build our programs on. And this is the model that we have been shifting towards in development, I would say, for the past decade, right? And it's been slow, but now it's much more glaring, right? And this is a challenge that has also come from how social movements have been organizing, how grassroots movements have been organizing, have heavily influenced this aspect of impact measurement. Because what is the perspective of the person whom you're centering your programs on, right? In terms of implementation, but you don't look at it in terms of accountabilities. Now, to be able to manage the financing of IMM properly, it also, the data that we create, that we collect, and that we receive through our work should also, in many ways, allow us to shift the mindsets of the persons who finance, right? So a very good example is a challenge that we face when we are fundraising for things like capital projects, and you're told that is not a core programmatic area. This is not something that you really need. However, this is a strategic need most of the time for most organizations. And it is assumed that it is for scale, which is why it is shut down. But 9 out of 10 times it is not for scale, right? It's for doubling down. It's for creating internal resources to double down, to increase the outcomes and the impact that we're able to see in the places that we work, right? But being able to budget for IMM correctly means that you're able to shift the narrative for this kind of strategic funding into something that is viewed as core to impact. But it's very difficult to do that if we are not budgeting correctly for IMM to exist iteratively. So that means that you're considering the perspective of the implementers, both the primary implementer, the secondary implementer, the intermediaries that we engage, whether that's consultants or external experts, technical experts, but also, and most importantly, from the perspective of the client. So it should be a core consideration in programmatic budgeting. It should be a core consideration when we are seeking for funding as well, and looking at it as part of core to impact type of funding, because without that, it is very difficult to make justifications, as in the example, such as in the example that I've given around capital funding, right? And a very good example is, let's say there's a social justice center that requires a resource center, right? And this resource center needs to be built. Yeah. It is core to the work. It is core to their work around dissemination of information, around education within the areas of work that they are in, right? Whether that's civic, political, economic, social, cultural issues. That resource center is core to the impact. But until we're able to budget for IMM correctly and mainstreaming it within the programs that we run, not as a by the way, not as a contingency, but as a mainstay, such that at every point of, as we outline every point of programmatic implementation, we include the elements of IMM throughout that program, and you justify the costs for that. So the budget is actually the strongest and the most powerful tool, is just to make sure that the 5 to 10% we are allocating to IMM appears iteratively within the program cycle. It appears in contingencies, and it also appears in resourcing people internally and externally, and resourcing relationships between institutions and the clients that they serve.
Thank you. Thank you, Award, for sharing that and reminding us that even if we forget about everything you've shared, let's remember about the budget. The budget is like the main part of it, since again, we might have operational budgets, but again, if we don't have the IMM budget and the people to do it, then we might be failing in creating the financial models and framework from that lens. Um, to Abiola, given your data-driven and system-oriented approach to ESG and sustainability, what are some of the new or overlooked questions that we across the social impact and development space should be asking when we assess the impact of our programs today? Abiola? Abiola, are you there? Okay, maybe we can proceed to the next one, which is Tumeru. Your work deeply, your work mainly is working deeply with communities, often left out of traditional design and measurement process. That is the youth, peer communities, persons with disabilities, and more. Could you share an example where your human-centered approach helped redefine what impact actually looks like and feels like for these communities?
Sure, I'll share an example not from sexual health, but from livelihoods, which I think is a much easier, broader area. So I was working on this project with urban refugees, where we were looking to when the program was looking to adopt climate smart livelihoods. And I returned to our clients as a human-centered designer to understand what value were they most deriving from this livelihood program and where we were falling short. So originally, the program was evaluating impact based on what regular livelihood programs evaluate, which is just increase in income generation, number of urban refugees reached, and that's the two primary indicators. When I worked with clients and kind of went around the work that they're doing, understood what they're earning, how it's impacting their lives, their children, a lot of these urban refugees being women, I learned that these climate smart livelihoods weren't their attempt towards a clean and green Kampala city, which is what you would think, but it was basically lucrative for refugees because it meant earning money out of unused resources or like out of nothing. So refugees are often people who come to a place with no wealth and no land. So if they can generate money out of unused resources that the city has to offer, that to them is the biggest factor about a climate smart livelihood compared to any other livelihood opportunities. So that was one thing I learned. Another thing that I had learned there was that some of our clients were pursuing these livelihoods as solo ventures, but there were others who were working in groups, like a group of mushroom farmers or a group of black soldier fly production farmers. So, and the reason they were doing that was they had their own primary income generation work, which is, say, tailoring or something like that. But they were doing this as a way to pool and grow their money over time. Something that we were not even like evaluating or any such thing. So, because of these insights, it pushed us to segment our audience into two. One was a group that has no wealth, no land. So, what they are benefiting is how can we use unused resources and do this from our tiny homes, whether in the camp or like a rented space. So, a group that needed home-based income generation opportunities out of unused resources. The second was a group that prioritized low effort investment opportunities. Like you could invest in stocks, and here I'm looking to invest in mushroom farm or a black soldier fly farm. So based on that, we adapted our impact metrics to track, say, ROI or return on investment for the investment driven groups, because now that's what they're doing. They're doing investment. And then the number of the reach or the breadth of our impact on number of income generating home businesses. So the fact that what is most important to our clients is they can do this from home. So how many clients are we enabling to run these businesses from their small homes? So this aligned us, or this allowed us to pivot our measurement and evaluation or like, how we define success with the way how our clients define success. And that I think is very important. Like, it's not about how we think success, or like about measuring how are we reducing carbon emissions, which may not be the most important impact criteria for our clients. So how do we align our success metrics to how our clients align their success metrics? Yes, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Meru. And that will really come in handy to help us in measuring impact from how we align our impact to that of our investors, our beneficiaries, and that of for the people that we serve in the communities. So thank you very much for that and for sharing that example. To Chris, when thinking about systemic transformation, especially in community-led development of policy influencing programs, what kind of indicators or metrics have you found most effective in capturing real and lasting change? Chris?
Thanks, Kevin. One of the challenges that I'll start with a challenge that maybe that comes out is most of the organizations or the communities that I've worked with, they just look for results. They don't look for impactful results. So they'll just say, maybe we delivered to 300 people. Right, it's an indicator, 300 people, but was it successful? Was it impactful? That's maybe where the question comes in. So one of the things that we have done, I would not put a specific indicator, but I would say we managed to streamline the impact, to see the impact in the specific results of whatever initiative we had done. Working with a youth group, with different youth groups around Malawi, one of the things is that you would see that these young people would attend academies and then they come out and then they are done. Yes, we did a leadership academy, we are back. But what does that mean in itself? It means you just attended. It didn't mean that you had an impactful attendance. So what we did was to now, let's say, fund these. I was on the forefront of championing granting to these young people. Let's fund them. And then each one of them must develop a project of their own. Once they have developed that project of their own, let them now go into the field and implement what they have learned. And then we'll measure the results and the impact of what they have learned, not just them themselves. So I find streamlining indicators as one of the paramount element in terms of impact measurement. It shouldn't just be directed on the result, but the actual and real impact. It must even transcend to even the third person. Because if we send them to train other young people, what is that other young people doing? We also keep track of that. So the indicators and all the other factors that comes with the impact measurement must be streamlined to the last person that receives the benefits of whatever initiative we have had. I will have to stop there for now. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Chris. And I'm glad that you're connecting this to the ecosystem, because a streamlining of the indicators to all the beneficiaries and all the users shows that then it's a whole cycle that is being considered, and everyone is being considered through the whole process and through the metrics. And lastly, to award, given your work on proposal development and organizational strengthening, what do you think nonprofits must prioritize measuring impact beyond financial metrics or donor requirements? What values does this bring to a long-term mission success?
The temptation is to always report upwards, like I said, to the people who fund you. But organizations need to start using their IMM systems to measure themselves first. And how do you measure yourself first? You measure yourself based on your outcomes. You measure yourself based on your systems, and you measure yourself based on your client response. That is the most important thing. That is the core business. That is what influences your mission alignment. Before we start answering to the external, it's important to figure out how do we answer to ourselves internally. And there are many tools that are used for this, right? There are a lot of tools like ORCA that check, your institutional health, your governance systems, a lot of organizational capacity building tools, right? We're looking at governance, management practices, financial resources. How do you do your accounting? How do you manage your budgets? How do you build internal assets, right? Whether that's through investments or through your people in terms of human resource, work organization, mission competence of the organization. How well are you able to achieve your goals, and how do the outcomes that you're generating, especially your long-term outcomes, reflect towards that mission competence in terms of sectoral expertise, in terms of ownership from the people that you serve, in terms of client or beneficiary ownership. How are you measuring the relationships that you're building with your partners? How are you measuring the relationships that you're building with other intermediaries, technical experts, government in some cases? And then this is where you now look at how are we building our relationship with our funders. So you can see it's quite a small fraction of what it is organizations should be focusing on when measuring. So you measure yourself first, know thyself. That is what is most important then, because it is in measuring yourself that you know the areas of optimization. Now, those areas of optimization may not necessarily be scale. It may be improving. It may be system improvement. It may be pivoting, because we are talking about like the stages, right? It may be that you're sailing, you're navigating, you're tacking, and you may need to do some pivoting, right? It is in pivoting and knowing when is the most strategic place to do that. And this is why we always say that a strategy is a living document. And the strategy needs to be a triad. It needs to cover your programs, it needs to cover your fundraise, and it also needs to cover your communication and the way you disseminate information. And IMM touches on all of these, because what you measure for your internal systems affects the program trials part of the triad. When you're measuring things like lagging and leading indicators for your resource mobilization for success, you're looking at your churn rate, you're looking at how well your retention rate, the donor lifetime value within the organization. So you're able to measure that section. And a lot of it is still influenced by what kind of investments you make internally. And then the third part of the triad is looking at communication. And it's basically, what are you communicating and how are you communicating what it is you're doing? Because if you're talking about storytelling with data, it should not just be accountability facing upwards towards your funders, but it should be horizontal towards your clients. So it's important to look at IMM within the strategy triad and making sure that there is consistency across the board. Consistency, not necessarily in terms of the information that you're receiving, because that is impossible. You cannot receive the same type of information all the time. Context matters, right? I think we've learned that with the funding freeze for USAID. That now the context within which people are operating is different. So the context will change. Things will shift politically, economically. The pandemic was a context shifter. So a lot of things that could be big or small could shift things, right? And it's important for that IMM strategy to be adaptable for all three areas of the strategy triad. And that is what will root the growth of the organization in a positive direction. And it will now create a kind of a multiplicity of uses for your IMM system. So it is not just horizontal, but it is vertical and it is internal. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that award and for reminding us that we need to focus on horizontal as well and ensure that we get to focus IMM to all the practitioners and all the participants in the ecosystem, and being consistent as we do that. So thank you for sharing that award. And now I turn it back to the participants. What are there any questions that you might be having for the panelists? I can take two. What is resonating? What is unclear from what you're hearing from the panelists that you would love them to elaborate? You can ask the question, or you can write it on the chat, and I'll be checking it out there. So we have like 5 minutes to share that. So anyone can go. And as we proceed, I can see there are interesting conversations happening on the chat space. So check them out and get to ask anything that you might be having for the panelists there. And I'm sure we can get back there. And I can see Abiola is back. Maybe before we close, I would love to invite Abiola to share with us his experience with data-driven and system-oriented approach to ESG and sustainability. What are some of the new and overlooked questions that we cross across the social impact and development space, and should be asking when we assess the impact of our programs today? So maybe Abiola, you can take that up. Maybe he's experiencing internet problems, but I'm sure if he gets to hear this, he can share it on the chat space, so that again we get to interact with that and get to learn more from his experience and all that. So maybe for those who have questions, we can share them on the chat. As we continue with this conversation, we'll get to the panelists are still here, and will be looking on the chats to help us expound on any questions that arise from that lens. So with that, allow me to share a heartfelt thank you to our panelists for your time, insights, generosity in sharing your experiences with us today, your diverse perspective from human-centered design to ESG strategy to sustainability, financing, and systems leadership, having truly enriched our understanding of what it means to lead with impact at the helm. You reminded us that meaningful measurement goes beyond metrics. It's about accountability, it's about intentionality, it's about consistency, it's about co-creating change with the communities and all the participants in the ecosystem. So thank you for that, and thank you for inspiring us to think deeper, act smarter, and collaborate more boldly in our pursuit for systemic transformation. Thank you very much, our panelists, and we look forward to hearing from you and getting to share our questions with you as we proceed. So with that, we go to the third part of this conversation, which is the breakout sessions. Now it's time to shift the gears again and get to do and move from more of listening to now more of doing. And we've got two exercises lined up. One on the first two phases of IMM, and we'll be dividing us into two equal groups, where group one and breakout room one will cover the impact in tech mapping, and I'll be leading that, where we get to get clear on the impact we want to create, and with breakout two, led by Award IHO, where they get to move more on stakeholder persona mapping, which will emphasize more on how and the players in experiencing our impact and how we empathize with them and get to see how everyone has their needs, what needs the people have, what needs the different players in the ecosystem have. So for the IT person, kindly help me and help us break out into breakout sessions. See you on the other side. Thank you. Please, you can help us with that. Be from each participant, either one from group 1 and one from group 2. What stood out for you in the breakout session? What did you find interesting? What resonated with you throughout the breakout session? Anyone can go. We can start with group 1, then go to group 2. Abiola from group 1. Or anyone from group 1 can go, so that again we get to get the feedback and get to see how we can proceed.
Was I in group 1 or group 2?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Was I in group 1 or group 2? What was your group?
Group 1 that was handling
Orienting.
or impact intent mapping on orienting.
Yes. So for me, I found the exercises quite interconnected, but initially not so easy to reply to. You really had to put yourself in the shoes of one of them, the community, especially when people come to help you. Do they always assume they know what you need, or do they tend to ask you? So for me, I just try to actually put myself in those shoes and then be able to apply that. So it was very practical. It needed that practical applicability to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Victor. Anyone from group 2? Group 2, anyone? Or maybe a word you can recommend someone to share.
Maybe Charles could share. Don't know if he's still, yeah, Charles Msimbi.
Thank you so much. It took me some time to get connected to the dot, but let me share with you. So, like I was dealing much on the area of intermediary, and we had a question that addresses us on like is it investors need? So one thing that stood out was an issue of risk optimization. Like every investor or anyone who has been funded, you normally faces the issues of risk, like how you're going to deal with the risk. We also addressed the issues of like personal, what I was doing on the issues of capacity building. In most cases, like the partners, implementing partners, we normally face the issues of capacity building. So I tackled that one as an issue to be addressed. Yeah. Let me stop there. Maybe someone from the group can also add on what I have shared.
Thank you for sharing that and aligning that to the conversation today. And maybe I understand, were you able to get to the last part of the session? I understand the session was timed with a shorter time. Were you able to get through that?
So unfortunately, because of a bit of technical difficulty, we're not able to get to the end. So perhaps we can take us through.
Thank you. Maybe I would request Liz or Mutile to help in projecting, but I believe we are all on the mirror. So as you follow, if you are in group 2 or group 1, you see an arrow that leads you to another document below that asks for your experience. In your experience, how much do current approaches to impact measurement management provide value to investees, investors, and the intermediaries? So for the first one, to help in voting for the first one, all you need to do is pick one of these yellow and move them to 1. Maybe it provides a lot of value, provides some value. It's distracting and not valuable, depends on the situation. And maybe if you're unsure on how to respond, you can move it there. And we can do the exercise in the next 5 minutes so that we all get to close. So 1 minute to vote on that, and then we can proceed to the second one. Thank you. So we can proceed to the second one, which is, what is one thing you would do differently to strengthen the first 2 stages of the IMM journey that you've tackled today? Thank you for the responses. We can share, since we are part of the ecosystem and the people that support the whole ecosystem, what are some of the pitfalls organizations face in each of the two phases we've covered today? The first one is navigating phase, and the second one is orienting phase and navigating phase. So you can share your comments around that, and we have around 3 minutes to close on that. Thank you for sharing in the responses. As we proceed to do that, I would love to invite Maxi Erikitao, who is the group CEO of Development Dynamics, to take us through closing and CTA and helping introducing the next last Thursday series. Maxi, over to you.
Hello, you can hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, participants, for this session. I think it's, as we pointed at the beginning, we have determined to look at issues from a systemic angle. And it's important that we plan for, we manage, and we measure that level of system leveraging that we think the thing that we want to create change, and that's what it requires from us. So I believe today has served as a good beginning point where we orient ourselves and where we are in the ecosystem. We also view how we are going to navigate. There are two more parts to this measurement, or rather to this model or framework that we are using. There are two other parts that we will do in the next month. Our board will remain open, and we will share this as part of a package, both of these particular slides that were used here, as well as the recording and the mirror board, so that hopefully we all can continue just looking at it, feeling it, examining our own selves and our institutions and where we are as an entity, and also as a as part of a broader network and a broader community, and use this to track and to prepare for the next session. The next session, again, will be on the last Thursday of next month, or rather, the last Thursday of May. That should be on the 29th. We will convene again at the same time. I believe when we signed up for this, it sort of brought 2 calendar invites, so we should already be signed up for the next one. And not only are we going to share what we've covered today, but we'll also share some prompts of how we can begin thinking about the next session. There is a number of resources that we put up today and that will be useful. I think in utmost conclusion, we are at an interesting time, and the time that we are living in, for the longest time, I guess since slightly before COVID, we were calling this season or this time that we are living in, they are existential times, but we are calling them VUCA, where a lot of things are volatile, urgent, confused or complex, and very ambiguous. And at times, as change makers, we can get boggled down by the all at onceness of it all. And that's where design and systems and foresights comes to play. And that's where planning for, managing, and measuring impact at the level in which you can leverage, that's why it becomes even more important. And thank you for all subscribing to the idea that we cannot wait for this moment to pass us by. A lot is at stake. We are the holders of the future. And we find ourselves in an industry or in a sector that is, we probably can call it for purpose. And the purpose in which we are serving is impact and not necessarily bottom line, as is perhaps defined by other sectors. For us, it's impact and it's purposeful change in behavior, in adaptations, that not just at an individual level, but at an ecosystem level. And because we have chosen to be part of the broader solution, and I'm speaking with us all here, we've chosen to be part of solving the future that we so desperately want to be a better future for ourselves and our future generations. So this effort in terms of just thinking around designing for and managing and measuring and tracking the metrics that matter at an ecosystem level is an important conversation, and I applaud us all for being part of it. We will reconvene again, as I said, on the 29th. And until then, I wish you all a good time, and look forward to us sharing the outcomes of this, some insights from this, the same Miro for us to continue creating on, and some prompts for us to also begin thinking about the next one. I appreciate all of us who contributed towards this day. Thank you. Back to you, Kevin.
Thank you for that, Maxi, and thank you to all the participants. We've come to the end of the session, and we are looking forward to seeing you and hosting you in the next one, which will be happening on the 29th of May, with a continuation of the same. And thank you very much, and enjoy the evening, and have a good one. Thank you.
Yes, it's just us now.
Yes, yes. That's it.
Tila, will you guide our quick debrief?
Yes, I
Maybe
shall.
we can pause the recording.